If you have any question, you can interrupt me, but we are also going to have a Q&A at the end if you have any other question that might come up during. Okay, so the path of translation. I use this title because I wanted to convey that my path of translation. So I had something before studying, during my studies, and then now that I'm a professional, and I want to share that with you. So if you're interested and if you love languages as me, you can see maybe I can do something about it. So let's see. First of all, something about who I am. My name is Cristina Loayza. You can call me Chris, you can call me Cristina. My mother tongue is Spanish. I grew up in Peru. I am currently in Peru, so my mother tongue is Spanish, but I also learned English when I was in school. We learn it since early age, but it's not really good in school. So then my parents decided to put me in an English academy, in an English institute. And that's when I discovered, okay, I love this. Because I used to say, you know, Spanish is the best language. It's really transparent, straightforward. You write it as you speak it as you write it, and English is so hard. But then once I was immersed into this culture, because this institute showed me the British culture specifically, I realized, oh my God, I love this. I want to do something with this. Then when I decided to, okay, I'm gonna be a translator, I like this. I learned French in university. I had the opportunity to do a semester abroad in France. I loved every minute of it. I also had a lot of problems, but that's part of the experience. And when I realized that I wanted to also be a polyglot by myself, besides my profession, I started to learn Italian, German. I also learned Latin, Quechua, Arabic, a little bit of those languages at university. So we have a lot of opportunities to do that. But now enough about me. Let's see what we can do. Before starting to discuss what do we do in university, what can you find when you go into this profession, have to go a little bit back. The history of translation in a couple of sentences, we can go back to the Roman times and say, okay, they used to think that translation was imitation, but they also saw something of improvement, of conquest in it. So once I have this text in my own language, I can improve it, I can make it better. Another good example of translation in history is, for example, the Bible. The Bible is a really good example when we see, for example, Martin Luther's story of his German translation. People used to say, hey, you shouldn't do this because you are messing between God and the believer. But he said, hey, we need to convey and communicate and to reach more people. So you have two things here that we always talk about. So betrayal of the original text and also communication, which is now what we see as translation. Then, so why is it important? And I can answer this with just one sentence. One question. Can I ask, Cristina, what is your mother tongue? Oh, it's Spanish. But so the person that discovered penicillin, did they speak your language? Probably not. The people that develop mathematics, algebra, did they speak your language? Not at all. And what about the people that first assemble a computer? No, not at all. Not at all. I see some faces there. So that is the importance of translation. We sometimes are described as people in the back, but we are so important because we connect, we convey, we communicate. And sometimes it's a cliche, but yes, we are a bridge between two communities, two people, two languages. So that is really important. Because now when we talk about translation, we not only talk about languages, we talk about languages and culture as one. That is what is important. And that is what I think attracts us to languages, right? Not only learning one language, but also discovering a whole new world with it. And that's what translation is about. Then I can ask, with all of that knowledge, I can answer, what is translation? In the basic form, translation is you have a source text, and by the magic of your brain and your knowledge, you have a target text of a different language. But translation can go beyond that. We can talk about the product of translation. We can talk about the profession. We can talk about the process. We can talk about the people that are involved in this process. So it just goes beyond that. And something that I really think we should mention before we move forward is translator versus interpreters. Because as I mentioned with the Romans, they talk about imitating, and I say a text, but it's not actually a text. Everything was oral. Let's remember that language is first spoken and then it is written. So translator, we focus more on written text. Audiovisual translation is also a thing, but interpreters work with the spoken word. And the abilities that you have to be a good one are totally different of translators. I myself don't consider myself a really outspoken person or extrovert, but a lot of interpreters are. They love being the center of attention. They love speaking with new people. They are really quick on their feet to think about solutions. But translators, we think more of reflection. We do research. We want to have these little details, something that you. So that's a really, really interesting and important thing that we should have in mind. Now, actually studying translation. Well, first of all, let's remember that I'm talking about my Peruvian perspective, but this is not as different as other countries, okay? The basics are the same. And the most important thing that right now I have to clarify is that we do not only learn languages and that's it. That's false, that's a myth. We talk about working languages, A, B, and C. What are my A, B, and C? My A language is my native language. I cannot say that English is my A language, even if I've been studying for 20 years. That's simply not true. You know, I grew up in a Spanish-speaking country. My family speaks Spanish. So my native language and my A language is Spanish. My B language is English because I can translate from English into Spanish and from Spanish into English. I have that possibility because I can master it. Well, I have mastered it, and you can do that with other languages as your country or market allows you to. And then your C language is the one that you have a good understanding of them, but you can translate only from that language to your A language, but not the other way around. I cannot do, in theory, I cannot do Spanish into French. French is my C language. In theory, again, we're gonna see later about the reality, the market, what we do after we study. So that's it. We learn about our languages. We have to know it at perfection. I've studied so much of Spanish that I didn't even knew it existed. We talk about story, we talk about history, we talk about culture, we talk about structure, grammar. Why does this word like this? Why does this word like that? And the same thing with English and the same thing with French. For example, talking about different empires, talking about conquest, all of that influence language. So it's really important that we know. Then you can see here, for the people that understand Spanish, this is my university's first and second semester. So you have here lengua materna, which is my native language. Traductología is the study of translation studies, as we call it in English. So you get to do like a meta study of what translation is. We learn, again, story, how does it work, who is involved, what process can we have, what techniques can we develop, etc., etc. Then we have technology, and this is something really, really important because we as translators shouldn't be afraid of technology. there's a lot of people saying that our jobs are gonna disappear because of technology. You know, you have Google Translate, DeepL, Lingua, etc., etc. But that's simply not true, because again, as before, I can answer that with a question. How do you translate from English to Spanish? It's raining cats and dogs. Or we need to address the elephant in the room. All of those things are gonna be translated literally, like está lloviendo gatos y perros, or hay que hablar del elefante en el cuarto in Spanish. But that's not a thing that we said. That's simply not how it works. Not a thing that we normally will say for those situations. And those things are what we as humans, are native speakers, can solve very easily when we have more experience, of course. But those kind of things, for example, translating songs, poems, doing subtitling and dubbing, that's really, really hard for a machine to do. So that's when we need to think, okay, maybe a machine is not gonna replace us, but it's gonna make our job 100% faster and better, and of better quality. That's also important. Us as new translators of this new generation, we can talk about a better process with better quality and with a better time, talking about smaller deadlines, because we use these new technologies. Unlike older translators that are still stuck in their own process and cannot live out this globalized world that we live in now, for example. Then we talk about interculturalidad, which is really important. So we talk about the intercultural abilities that we need to have. It might be obvious that we need to be ethical as any profession, but since we're dealing with totally different people, maybe, I don't know, I'm translating for Chinese government and the Peruvian government. They had completely different cultures, even if we are developed countries. Well, in Peru is a little bit debatable, but yes, we have different cultures. And here we need to be careful of what we do, how we do it, what we say, with what words. So that is what interculturalidad gives us. We are aware of the reality of our country, of our world. We are a really social person, social in the matter like social studies, you know, anthropology, psychology, philosophy. We learn all those things to understand where are we standing. How is this going from here to there? It's really, really important. And then, well, research is really important because the translation has not been developed for so many years as other disciplines have. It is true that we used to belong to linguistics, applied linguistics, but it's not really true. We are a completely different discipline with different abilities. And now interpreting is also considered a different study. Interpreting studies also exist. So that is really important. We have to give back to our profession. At least in my university's case, it was really important. And finally, interpretation, so interpreting. Yes, I said that they are not the same, but it is true also that I think there's no university in the world that will give you a bachelor's degree of interpreting. So if you're more interested in knowing, okay, I don't actually want to be sit down and, you know, translating documents all day and only with myself, you know, doing research. I want to be on the place. I want to be with two people that need to communicate and I want to help them. That is interpreting. That is what interpreters do. And we are kind of like have a basis of that in our career, in our studies. It's really important because then you will also give the flow. There are disciplines that are not the same, but they are connected. So one can lead you to the other. That is completely true. Then, as I mentioned that I am from a Peruvian university, I've also had the experience of going to a French university. My French experience taught me that in some countries, you are not gonna get a bachelor's in translation straight away. Some of them study, for example, Spanish studies, African languages, linguistics, something like that. And then when you do a master's, you get into actual translation. This is especially true for countries and for areas, for example, in Europe or in the United States, where you have a plethora of languages. And the universities will give you the opportunity to study your languages. But they have so many languages that they cannot do, for example, a workshop of translation of English and Spanish. Like in my country, we can, because the offer that they have is only Spanish, English, French, and Portuguese, and Chinese in some universities. German and Italian, maybe. So they are able to have workshops specifically for those things. But in other universities, again, like Europe and the US, you will have translation workshops. They will teach you how to translate, techniques, processes, how do we do this, how do we do that. But then you have to apply to your own combination of languages. That is really important to understand. Then you do have maybe other countries in which you can find the bachelor of translation, but it depends of the amount of years. For example, I've studied for 5 years in university. And in other countries, they study, I think, for 3 years. In France, I think they do 3 years. So it really depends. I've met a lot of people that study translation, yes, as a workshop, but they also study how to teach Spanish, Spanish relationships, Latin American war. That was their study of Spanish. And then they can go on to do a master's only in translation or interpreting. That's also a possibility. So that's pretty much it. If you have already an idea of what you want to do and you want to see, okay, is this like, how is this different from your experience? Maybe you can send me your, you can message me and you can send me, hey, Cristina, I found this example of a university I want to go. Do you think this is okay? Do you think this will offer me this and that, what I'm looking for? So it's really important to contact people that are already in the field, because translation also works and also changes really fast with technology. Then the translation market. And yes, I talk about in theory a lot, because in theory, I should only be translating from my language, from other languages, for example, the C to my own language. But the reality is this. In my case, the Peruvian market allows me to translate from Spanish to French, because it's not as easy to find a translator whose native language is French in our area. Even in South America, it's different. It's difficult to find. And if you were to contact somebody from France, or Canada, whatever, the prices will go up. So it does not work with our market. It's better to find somebody that is good at one language and that knows about translation and they can do it. That's what our market can allow us to do. But in other markets, for example, in the European one, you can easily find somebody that speaks Spanish, that speaks Finnish, that speaks English, etc., etc. So most of the time, translators there would only work to their own languages, not to their B or even the C, even the B language, because it's easy to find somebody that already has that native language. That is also something that you have to have in mind. Hey, Cristina, my A language is this, my B language is that. I want to study this for C. Do you think it works for our market? Maybe you can find something specific for you, and that'll be great. You will be the only one or the first one to do it. You'll have a lot of money, maybe. But it's also important to evaluate that kind of thing. Then the second one is specialization, which means that translation, when I decided to study translation, I also have a lot of opportunities and a lot of options. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be geologist. I wanted to be an architecture. And just like me, I found out that a lot of my friends had the same idea. You know, I have a friend that wanted to be a vet, that also wanted to study international relationships, that wanted to study business, that wanted to be an athlete. And then somehow we ended up studying translation. But that is something common, because when you finish studying translation, you can specialize on those fields. Specialization is really important for us because you cannot have the entire knowledge of the world and you can translate it from Spanish to English. No, that's not happening. You can have one specialization because, for example, mine is mining, geology, and metallurgy. I only do those kind of topics because it's what I knew before, so what I grew up with, because my parents work on those fields. So I say, hey, then my work is going to be translating those kind of documents. I'm going to be that kind of person. Then I have friends that only work with law documents, you know, everything related to the law. Friends that only work with medical documents or medical situations. Then, I don't know, you can even be as specialized as only working in sports on the snow with this kind of gadgets. You're so specific that you're the only opportunity for anybody to find that job, to get that translation. You can be as that, but you can have a couple more. So that's really important when we look at our future. Where do I want to go? What jobs do I want to find? What jobs do I want to accept? First of all, you can be as meticulous as that. And then finally, types of translations. Yes, I mentioned that interpreting is not actually in translation, but we do talk about interpreting when we talk about what can I do after I study. I suggest always a master's degree if you want to be an interpreter, but then you can do interpreting for the UN, the European Union, for your own government, etc., etc. You can also, something that is really important right now, it's dubbing and subtitling. That is what we call audiovisual translation. So you only work with mainly those two, or with any kind of video, any kind of audiovisual text. We call everything text, even images are text. And talking about images, we can also be specialized in transcreation, which is really, really related to marketing. So, you know, McDonald's has the slogan, I'm loving it. In Spanish, it's not me está encantando. It's me encanta. Just, I love it. So somebody has to go to a whole new process to think about that. It's really related to marketing, and you have to be really great. Then we also have translation to give access to people. For example, for audio description, it's a really important thing right now in museums. You have a piece of art and you have to literally describe it so in detail that somebody that cannot see the piece will have the same feeling when they hear it. Or the other way around, for subtitling, but specific for people that cannot hear, and etc., etc. Accessibility is something that we also work with a lot. And then I will even dare to say that legal and medical are types of translations rather than specializations, because legal also have a lot of different topics, just like medical. So that's also really, really important. And finally, some clarifications. As I mentioned before, we're not going to learn 20 languages when we study translation. That is really, really important to understand. You have to realize, hey, I'm really good at these two languages, you know. I grew up with them, maybe I developed a really good relation with them. That is going to be my BNC language. And then we can go beyond that. For example, as I mentioned before, my C language is French, but I don't use French almost never, you know, actually never. I work with Italian, and I actually master, and I feel more comfortable talking in Italian than French, and Italian has become my C language. I apply everything that I learned in my translation workshops, in my translation studies in general, and I use it with Italian. And suggestions, after this presentation that we are having right now, I do suggest that you contact somebody that is on your field. For example, Cristina, I want to translate for Disney. I want to translate for Netflix. How can I know how to get there? Just go on LinkedIn and type translators, Netflix, translators, Disney, and you will have a whole result of people that work there. And you can message them and contact them and say, hey, I want to do something that you're actually doing. I want you to tell me if you think this path is okay or this and the other one. And that is important. As I mentioned before, translation changes almost every day because of technology and because of the general knowledge of the world. So we need to be really updated and looking for improvement all of the time. And that also comes with more people. Even if we are just in our computers translating 24/7, we are also a community. We are not a lot of translators in the world, so maybe you will get to meet a lot of them from your own country or from your own area. They'll say, hey, I know you, Cristina, you did this, you did that. Yeah, I remember we worked on this project. That is also important because then you can connect. For example, if you saw my description, it says that I am a co-founder of Dialoga Group, which is my own translation agency that I developed with a friend of mine from university. But as you also heard me saying, I only do mining and geology. So how can I tailor to a lot of other clients? It's because I have contacts. Other people that have studied with me, that have worked with me, I bring them if I need. Hey, I got this, this project about, I don't know, medicine in the pharmaceutical field with this specific thing. Oh, you know that. Okay, let's work together. And that's how we develop a gigantic network because it's really important for translation. So that's pretty much it. It was really fast. If you have any question, you can ask me. If you have any doubt, maybe something wasn't clear. Again, if you want to message me, this is my Instagram, and also this is the we are in Facebook and LinkedIn with my own agency, and this is our website. You can go, you can see what else you are interested in. We have a lot of information about translation. Yes, Camilla.